Hey everyone. I have a lot to cover, so I'm going to try and be quick with this. So I've been seeing a lot of people on Bitcoin Twitter being all upset about the price performance of Bitcoin over the past, basically, call it 6 months, whatever, since mid-November all the way to now. It's basically just been a downtrend and, basically trading sideways. And, it does not seem to like move on any sort of substantial news, like a couple of countries El Salvador adopting it here seems to have maybe affected the price, but then you got the futures that maybe have, pushed it down, and, who knows what's going on in this whole, situation right here, open shorting and whatnot. It just does not seem to be performing. It's actually, if you think about it in terms of a currency, it's actually been quite stable, moving sideways when you compare them to other third world countries that have hyperinflationary currencies. They just can't seem to get it under control, and Bitcoin actually tends to be a better option for them. So I'm going to just kind of run through real quick some really good metrics, some things that are not price related that are going on, and a lot of this has happened in the past like 48 hours. So this is one article talking about Boohoo price analysis. They think it could go. Bitcoin could drop from 40,000 down to 25,000. I don't think it's going down to 25,000, but if it did, cool, because Bitcoin has not stopped operating. It has not ceased its function. It has remained operative throughout this entire time. It has not canceled transactions, double spent anything, and here, let's go on. The Lightning Network capacity, this orange line here, is the number of Bitcoin on the Lightning Network. I myself have, opened up a node in some channels recently, so I am now a part of this metric here. So that's good to see. We're basically at all-time highs right now. We're just slightly below all-time highs for the amount of Bitcoin on the Lightning Network. So that's really, really good to see. Great metric to look at. Also, the amount of hash rate has recently hit another all-time high. We are it was, I believe, 223 exahashes per second. That means there are enough machines on this earth that are, I did the math, it's 1 billion. It's 1 billion times 1 billion. Yep. 1 billion times 1 billion is 10 to the 18th number of hashes per second. And a hash is just a number, it's a guess, it's a string of, it's an input that these machines are able, to compute, however, to try and guess the block for the next Bitcoin and to get rewarded. But it's 223 exahashes. So it's not only a billion, it's 223 a billion. And it's at an all-time high. And this chart, this is from the China band right here, which will be interesting to think about what China does in the future. If the rest of the world starts to adopt Bitcoin, will they be forced to also adopt Bitcoin, or will, how strong are they going to hold out for? But look, since the bottom out in July 21, it has been on an absolute tear. And we are now, again, at all-time highs. People take off their machines, they put them back on, who knows what's going on. But, people are, and I plan to, again, be part of this metric. I can't really mine profitably where I'm at right now. But it's just another, good data point to look at and say, okay, that is positive. And then also, if you're thinking about price performance, the number of Bitcoin on exchanges is basically at a 44-month low, is what they say. Yeah, a 44-month low. So in the past, nearly 4 years, almost 4 years, Bitcoin has not been this low on the exchanges. The amount of Bitcoin on exchanges, and every day, I swear, I see articles about this wallet has accumulated 100 million, Bitcoin in the past week. And, this wallet has accumulated, billions over the past 6 months or something like that. I see articles like that all the time. And it's just who cares what the price is doing? I'm scared that, the people that are taking it off of exchanges know what's going to happen in the future, and I'm afraid that I don't have enough. I feel somewhat comfortable with the stack that I have until I, start looking into stuff like this. I just want more because, and we'll get into later about one of my main reasons why I think everyone should be accumulating as much as they can. But in terms of accumulation, we got to talk about GigaChad. Michael Saylor here. Here's a chart. It's actually not up to date because I believe he's bought at least one more time in early April, and I'm pretty sure he's probably bought sometime between this 242 million to early April. So, but this kind of shows all of the point. It's not all of these little dots. That's something else. But like all of these arrows here show like times that MicroStrategy and Michael Saylor, who knows when Michael Saylor has been buying personally, but when they buy through MicroStrategy, they have to announce it publicly through the SEC. There was some FUD about them selling, but he went on Twitter and said that they weren't selling, and I have no reason to believe that they would be selling Bitcoin because they would be at a profit currently with the amount that they hold, but they're doing so much to accumulate so much, it would be illogical for them to have gone through such effort to acquire Bitcoin to just go ahead and, turn around and, sell it or whatever to, bolster or bootstrap their cash flows or something like that. It just wouldn't make any sense. This seems like he's a smart guy. He's been the CEO of a tech company for the longest than any other CEO in the industry, I believe. So he knows what he's doing, and the board supports him. So that being said, moving on, Fidelity. And again, this is like today. This is April 29th, 2022. Fidelity plans to offer Bitcoin options in your 401k retirement funds. Fidelity holds, I want to say, what is their assets under management? It's something ridiculous in like the trillions of dollars. I want to say, don't quote me on this, it was like $14 trillion. It was over $10 trillion. But Fidelity is one of the largest asset managers on the planet. It might be the largest asset manager on the planet. Don't quote me on that. I'm not sure. But they're planning to offer retirement Bitcoin for your retirement fund. Like people, like my mother and my father and, other, people that I know that are planning to retire, have retired, and what they want to do with their retirement money is completely up to them. But one of the reasons why my father won't invest in Bitcoin is because there's not an easy vessel. Everything's in his 401k retirement account, and he's not able to withdraw without, hitting hefty fees. And I completely understand that. So and I don't think he uses Fidelity. I'm not, in his finances or anything like that. But, if he were offered, the opportunity to buy Bitcoin through his retirement account and not incur a tax event, then he would absolutely want to do something like that. So moving on. Also, again, this is like today. Yeah, this is also today. Goldman Sachs offers first Bitcoin-backed loan as Wall Street embraces crypto, but it's Bitcoin. They don't care. I mean, some of them might care about other coins or whatever, but it's all Bitcoin. We know it's Bitcoin. But Goldman Sachs is getting in the space along with Fidelity because they don't want to be left out of the game. Moving on. And again, this was confirmed basically yesterday, but I guess there was rumors about it several days ago, which is why I talked about it several days ago. But again, Central African Republic becomes first secondary country to adopt Bitcoin behind El Salvador as official currency. It's now legal tender in Central African Republic. It's a small country. I believe it was like 3 or 4 million people or something like that. Don't quote me on that. But it's a country in the middle of Africa that is planning to use Bitcoin as their legal tender. Granted, that being said, I believe there was not a whole lot of people in that country that had access to internet. Or maybe it was about half of the people. But it'll be interesting to see how and if Bitcoin adoption in that country incentivizes other tech companies or people with the ability to build infrastructure out there for cell phones or other devices that would connect to the internet to be able to use a Bitcoin hard wallet or something like that how much that would affect the actual infrastructure of the internet in that country. So El Salvador, I believe, had a higher internet adoption rate, so they were more easily available to adopt Bitcoin. But this country not being in such a position, it'll be interesting to see if these people adopt and how quickly they adopt and what that does to their internet infrastructure. So that being said, moving on to the next city in Texas, Fort Worth is becoming the first city in the U.S. to mine Bitcoin. And here's a picture. There's 3 miners right here, and it's just a test program. So based on just this image right here, I believe they're S9s or something like that. I did the math, and they're actually not going to be making any profit with this, but they will be accumulating something like, don't quote me on this, like 17,000 Satoshis a day or something like that. It's not like a whole lot, basically, because they're old, outdated machines, and the difficulty adjustment is way higher. I mean, I remember when S9s came out, and I thought, you know, oh, these are great. But now, like, they have, like, the SJ19s or whatever the fuck. And it's just the newer machines are obviously much more efficient than these ones here. But it's interesting to see that a city, you know, especially in Texas, because they're very, very pro Bitcoin. It's interesting to see them, you know, experiment with something like this, and I'm happy that they're doing it. I mean, people behind the scenes are learning about it. They're, you know, someone may be interested that is in the office of wherever these machines are, and walk by and try and learn about them, and, you know, maybe say something to their friends. And that's how Bitcoin is basically a grassroots adoption sort of technology. And the more that we talk and educate other people, the better. So this woman and this man, whoever they are doing a service to the Bitcoin community. God bless them. Moving on. This article was really good. It compared the adoption rate of Bitcoin compared to the internet. And there are several metrics that this guy goes into. Let me say his name, John Islil. Sorry, I butchered his last name. I know I did. But it compares like the number of users basically in, you know, the early 90s as we are today. So I think we're roughly around 140 million users, like roughly today. This article is a year old, but it's still applicable and relevant. So it went, you know, from 16, let's say, you know, rough numbers, it added 120 million in 3 years, the internet. So it'll be interesting to see, you know, what the next few years, because it basically doubled in 2 years from there. So if in 2 years the number of users double, then that would basically put us at 300 million. However, this chart has the number of users of Bitcoin adopting us at people adopting Bitcoin will reach up to 1 billion by 2025. So basically add another year, and we're, you know, 3 times, you know, the 300 million. So we're at 1 billion. So that's really interesting to see. The number of new addresses, which I think this is kind of a BS metric, just because everyone can create a new address. They do it all the time. But and then also active addresses really not that great, because I use, you know, the same addresses, you know, frequently, but I also create new addresses frequently. So, you know, take these charts with a grain of salt, but they do seem to be relatively close to each other, but trending upward. This one back almost to all-time highs, and this one basically at all-time highs. Price growth, not really a whole lot relevant, which is what the point of this whole video was. And then one of the points that I was going to make about why I think that Bitcoin is a better investment than gold is because of the stock to flow. People love the stock to flow model, you know, because the big Plan B, that's his name, he's on Twitter, is the one that created this. There it is, that's his handle and everything, so I give him credit. But I know this is slightly outdated. I'll show you the updated one here in a second. But people like this because it has us trending at like $100,000, you know, in the next few years, and people thought that we'd be hitting over $100,000 by now. But clearly, this chart does not say that we should be there by now. I mean, sort of, but it's an average. So you got to think about averages. And if we're moving up, then if we're on this here, let me show you. If we're on this trajectory here, where we're trending below the average of where we should be, then obviously we need to be trending above the average for some period of time. Okay, sorry, the video cut me off. Not sure why it did that, but one thing I realized is I hate my voice on these videos. But since no one's going to make it this far anyway, if you recall, I was just talking about that we'll have to trend upward above this average for some period of time in order for the average to be roughly at $100,000 here. So it's just a matter of time before we trend upward, or we could trend downward. I mean, the price honestly doesn't really matter. But that being said, the current stock to flow is roughly 51 to 55, depending on what average you take. The 10-day over the 463 days, it's an odd number. But it's roughly 51, 55. So if we go and compare it to gold, which is roughly 59.9, so call it 60, back in 2019, not sure what it is now. I didn't realize that was that old, but the point being is gold is not too far away from the reaching grounds of Bitcoin's stock to flow. So after the next halving in roughly 2 years, it's almost exactly 2 years, the stock to flow of Bitcoin will, I believe, go over 100. Don't quote me on that, but because of the halving of the next halving, I believe currently the block reward is like 6.25 Bitcoin, so it'll go down to 3 and 1/8 Bitcoin, 3.125 Bitcoin. So it'll be interesting to see, and it's in a varying number, because obviously the stock will increase until the flow is cut in half again. So I believe it should trend downwards slightly until it goes back up, and then it'll trend downwards slightly. But the jump up are immense, and then the trending downwards slightly are very small. So that's one of my bullish reasons why I really think that because of just how close we are to reaching gold stock to flow, the overall market cap of gold is roughly 10 to 12 trillion, somewhere around in there, basically 10x to 12x from where Bitcoin is. Bitcoin's at $350 billion, or sorry, $750 billion right now, total market cap, roughly at the $40,000 price. So if we trade up to, like, call it $60,000, we'll be at $1 trillion market cap, and then we'll be about 10x away from gold. So if we do another 10, and it's really not impossible for us to reach that. One of the reasons being is that with all of, like, Fidelity, for instance, having all of these assets under management, if one fraction, call it 10% of what Fidelity has under management, which is roughly $10 trillion, $14 trillion, somewhere around in that range, it's add another trillion to Bitcoin, because Bitcoin will start to absorb other stores of value from other places, and it'll equal itself out with everything else on the planet. Not everything will go away. Not everyone will only invest in Bitcoin, and not everyone will only invest in bonds or only invest in people all obviously only invest in real estate and certain sectors and such, but people will open up as regulation. Here, let's talk about the final point, because regulation, this is one of the things that I think people are really waiting on, is once, this was about 2 months ago, is when the president put this out, and to Michael Saylor's point, when he said that no other time has a president or enacted or told Congress or whomever he told to do this research, but no other point in the U.S. history has the president ever said to please, we need to research this new technology and adopt it in some form or fashion and figure out the risks of it from a regulatory standpoint. And that's it's honestly a responsible thing to do. Whereas, most of the Bitcoin community thinks that we don't need that sort of regulation, and I tend to sort of agree with that, because I'm more or less on the page of, once the KYC sort of slows things, that KYC will be implemented by more and more exchanges, and it'll probably get harder to get no KYC Bitcoins, but there are ways that you can still get KYC free Bitcoin. So, and then there's also, whirlpool mixing and things like that, and, offline trading with other people that you can do. So there's a number of resources that are still available to create or acquire non-KYC Bitcoin. So it's not the end all be all. And I think that as regulation comes through, that'll give more opportunity for large institutions to feel comfortable investing in this space. But obviously with the more KYC and everything like that, could hinder some of the more hardcore Bitcoiners use of or would make it more difficult potentially to use Bitcoin in transactions if they try and KYC everything. But there are still anonymous ways to do all sorts of tasks, and as the regulation comes, new technologies will be developed to make Bitcoin much more secure and private and anonymous. So I just see that coming. So when you look at the price, don't get so bummed down about it, okay? It's not the end of the world. It's been trading down and sideways, okay? And it's been trading slightly up. It's been bouncing off this, what is the 650-day close, the red line here? It's been bouncing off that a few times. Like, just because we're hovering right above it, there's no cause for any sort of panic. All of these metrics that I just went through with you are bullish cases for adoption of Bitcoin. There's a lot going on, guys. And if you don't see it, if this doesn't explain it to you, then I don't know what will. So stack your sats accordingly.